Have you ever felt like time's speeding up, with days blending into years, in a way that's hard to explain? You're not imagining it. Psychological research points to a phenomenon called temporal compression, where our brains struggle to create distinct memories because we lack clear cultural anchors, especially in the years after 2000. Without naming decades to organise our experiences, periods seem to run together, making it difficult to recall what set one apart from the other. If you felt like your days blending together, hit the like. This video will explain exactly what isn't just in your head. We'll look at how shifts in culture, language and technology are warping our sense of time, and why the 2020s feel so hard to define. To understand how we got here, let's have a look back in time when decades felt unmistakably different. Distinct decades once gave our lives a sense of rhythm and change. The 60s stood out with flower power, psychedelic rock, civil rights movement, images and sound that instantly evoke a particular moment in history. The 70s arrived with disco, punk, dramatic shifts in social attitude. Even the 90s brought grunge, the early internet. It all had its own style. But when we're trying to pin down what defines 2010, recent decades seem to blur together, making it hard to recall what set one apart from the next. This blurring isn't just nostalgia. Before 2000, decades often felt like chapters with clear beginnings and endings. We had names for them: roaring 20s, 60s, swinging 60s, and the names reflect and share the experience. Cultural trends in music, fashion and social movements helped everyone to feel part of the same era. These markers gave us common language for time, and they shaped how we remembered our lives. Everything began to shift around and turn in the millennia. Fashion cycles sped up, shrinking from years to months. Music lost its dominant genes. The charts blending styles and eras together. Social and political movements no longer lined up neatly with 10-year spans. Instead, culture became a constant churn of fleeting trends. The sense of a decade as a shared cultural movement faded away, replaced by an endless scroll of microtrends and fragmented experiences. This change has real effects on how we remember our lives. A 2019 experiment published in Memory and Cognition found that people recall about 30% fewer personal events from periods that lack strong decade labels. Our brains use milestones, like high school graduation in the 90s, or my first smartphone, to organise memories. Without these anchors to place the events in time, the result ends up as a muddled sense of the past, where years seem to run together, nothing stands out. Some point to technology for this shift, while others blame globalisation and erosion of regional cultures. There's also the argument that Francis Fukuyama suggested history itself seems to be flattened, with progress and change less easy to track. Whatever the cause, the outcome is clear. When decades lose their shape, our sense of time weakens. We'll be left with a private, fragmented experience of the present, each person's timeline shaped by personal feeds and algorithms. But there's another piece to this puzzle, one that's easy to overlook. The words we use to describe time don't just capture our experience, they help create it. And when we stop naming our eras, we lose a vital tool in understanding both our history and ourselves. The way we talk about time shapes how we live it and how we remember it. The idea that language influences thought shows up powerfully in how cultures map out the past and the future. Some languages build time into their very grammar, while others rely on metaphor, and these different reaches have different depths in our minds. Modern language reflects these shifts. We use broad terms like these days or nowadays instead of naming decades. Generational labels such as Gen Z, Gen Y, Millennials focus on difference rather than shared culture. We see fewer time-marking phrases like back when in everyday conversation. Social media platforms reinforce this trend, emphasising perpetual present. Your feed rarely groups memories by year or era. It's all happening now, with little sense of before and after. Yet language isn't the only force shaping our timeline. Sometimes it's the weight of major events, crises that overshadow everything else, that end up defining the eras as we remember them most. As we look how we mark time, it's clear that trauma has become one of the most powerful tools for organising memories. Instead of decades with colourful nicknames, We now refer to periods as post 9/11, era of pandemic years. This shift is more than just a change in vocabulary. It alters the way our minds and culture remember. When we have a major crisis dominating a period, it becomes a narrow bookmark that overshadows everything else, shaping not just what we recall, but how we recall it. Psychological research shows that collective trauma creates what we call temporal anchors, events that our brains latch onto, often at the expense of other memories shared for the same period. During these times, the brain relies on fewer contextual memory areas, which means that entire years or even decades can be compressed around a single dominant event. Ask someone about the 2000s, and often 9/11 will come up first. In the 2020s, it's going to be COVID. This eclipses everything. The narrowing of memory makes it harder to recall the full spectrum of our experiences, from cultural milestones to personal achievements. This effect isn't limited to individual memory. Cultural memory flattens too. Before 2000s, decades were shaped by a mix of music, fashion and social movements. Now we often reduce eras to a single event in the media. The post 9/11 era or the pandemic years become shorthand, even though those times were filled with technological advances, new art forms and shifts in how we live and connect. When trauma becomes a dominant frame, it risks erasing the richness and complexity of these periods. The consequences reach beyond how we remember the past when we define time through trauma. It can make those years feel longer and heavier. Research suggests that people eliminate crisis-marked periods as subjectively longer. Yet when looking back, those same years seem compressed and indistinct because we remember less variety. This can lead to a sense of history as a series of emergencies, especially for generations that come of age during the crisis. For Gen Z, school shootings and climate anxiety has left their own marks. These experiences contribute to a feeling that time moves from one emergency to the next, with very little space for normalcy. Media and social platforms amplify this effect. News cycles focus on disasters and algorithms push the most dramatic stories on top of our feeds. Over time, this emphasis on crisis distorts our sense of what defined an era, making it seem as though only the worst events mattered. Positive moments create breakthroughs and everyday joys fade into the background. But our lives are more than a series of headline events. The 2000s also brought innovation, collaboration and cultural shifts that don't fit into a single narrative. The pandemic years included scientific breakthroughs, new forms of connection and moments of resilience. If we let trauma be the only frame, we lose these stories and the ability to see time as a mix of both hardship and hope. How we remember shapes how we move forward. If history feels like an endless chain of crises, it's easy to become anxious about the future. But by broadening our temporal anchors, by noticing and recording moments of growth, joy and creativity, we can reclaim a more balanced sense of time. Our memories, after all, are shaped not just by what happened, but by what we choose to notice and revisit. Still, there's another force at work in the way we experience time today, one that operates quietly. Every time we reach out for our phones, algorithmic feeds have quietly redrawn the boundaries of our experience of time. On platforms like TikTok and Instagram, algorithms select content that closely matches what you've already liked or watched. This creates a loop of familiar material, making it harder for your brain to register novelty. An essential ingredient for forming vivid memories and a close sense of time passing. Without these memory anchors, days and months start to blur and years feel like they're speeding by. Unlike older forms of media, TV shows with defined episodes or magazines with monthly issues, algorithmic social feeds never truly end. There is no actual breaks to mark the passage of time. Instead, endless scrolling keeps you suspended in a perpetual present. Neuroscientists have found that the lack of transition disrupts our internal timekeeping. The brain relies on boundaries, finishing a chapter, reaching the end of a playlist to segment the experience. When those boundaries disappear, hours can dissolve unnoticed, and the distinction between one day and the next weakens. This constant exposure to familiar content does more than just flatten your daily routine. Researchers have observed that heavy social media users routinely underestimate how much time they spent online, and report a heightened sense of deja vu. The repetition built into these feeds can make it feel as though you've already seen or experienced something before, even when you haven't. Over time, this leads to a sense of being stuck in a loop where cultural trends and personal experiences repeat with only minor variations. The way we document our lives has also changed. Before smartphones, capturing a memory took effort. Writing in a journal, developing a roll of film, now every moment is automatically time-stamped and archived. Yet cognitive science shows that the abundance of digital memories doesn't help us remember better. Recording and sharing moments pulls us out of the present, making it less likely we'll form strong memories. Most of these digital archives go unrevisited, so instead of anchoring our sense of time, they contribute to its erosion. Every shared cultural milestone has become fractured. Where once a new album or blockbuster movie could unite millions in the same moment, today's algorithmic feeds personalise every timeline. Your experience of culture is increasingly unique, shaped by what the algorithm thinks you want, rather than communal events. Studies of music nostalgia cycles reveal that since 2015, the lifespan of shared trends has shrunk dramatically. We're left with micro-genes and fleeting memes, but fewer collective markers to define an era. As these systems accelerate, the sense of time passing becomes even more inclusive. Chronological feeds have been replaced by engagement-driven algorithms, removing the last traces of sequence in history. Frequent social media users now struggle to place events in the right order, a problem linked to reduced activity in the hippocampus, the brain's timekeeper during memory tasks. The result is a world where the past and the future fade, leaving only endless now. All of this raises a deeper question. Was there a moment when the sense of time shifted so fundamentally that it broke the old rules? And if so, what happens to set us up with this new path? At the edge of the millennia, a unique disruption marked the way we experience time, the 1990 anomaly. As the world braced for Y2K, governments and corporations poured over $300 billion into updating computer systems to prevent a date glitch that could have derailed everything from banks to power grids. Y2K never happened. Instead, what lingered was a collective sense of anticlimax, a psychological reset that may have quietly recalibrated how we process stress and time. Neurologists note that large-scale stress events can shift our perception of chronological time and place. The countdown to Y2K became a kind of global pressure cooker, leaving a subtle but lasting imprint. The sense of something fundamentally changing didn't stop with technology. Whistleblowers tied to the alleged Project Looking Glass claimed that their device was designed to view possible futures, and it stopped working when all timelines converged in 2012 to 2016. Whether fact or fiction, this story echoes a broader feeling. After the millennia, history lost its clear forward march. Social media cycles, news, and even cultural innovation began to feel repetitive, as if stuck on autoplay. Memory itself started showing cracks. The Mandela effect shared false memories that challenged the historical records. It became a pop culture phenomena. A good example would be Nelson Mandela himself, where lots of people thought he died in late 80s when he was still alive. Psychologists see these cases of evidence of collective memory distortion, shaped by how groups process and reconstruct the past together. These glitches highlight how easily our sense of reality can be bent, especially after periods of uncertainty. Meanwhile, Earth's own rhythm seemed to have shifted. Researchers observed that Schumann's resonance, our planet's natural electromagnetic frequency, climbed from a long-standing 8.3 Hz to peaks above 30 Hz in the early 2000s. In controlled study, volunteers exposed to these rising frequencies reported altered perceptions of time, sometimes feeling it speeding up, sometimes slowing down. Meanwhile, the science remains unsettled. Many insist that time feels different now than it did before 2000. Cultural data reflects these changes. Trends that once shaped years, like disco or grunge, now flicker and vanish within months or even weeks. Music charts blend genes, fashion, cycles accelerate, and language loses its decade-based markers. Where people once spoke of the 90s, now phrases like back in the day or these days take over, erasing clear boundaries. As digital platforms personalise every feed, Shared anchors dissolve. Neighbours may live in the same year but occupy completely different timelines, curated by algorithms. The result of fragmented experiences of time and collective moments are rare, and the sense of a shared era fades. Some quantum theories propose that collective observation can influence reality. If billions experience a shift in perception, like around Y2K, that could subtly alter the flow of time itself. While the idea is speculative, the fact remains that post 1999, the world feels very different, fundamentally different. This fracture in our sense of time didn't just happen on its own. The way we label, the way we organise our identities has also played a role in quietly shifting the way we relate to the past and to each other. In recent years, the language we use to describe culture has shifted from decade-based identities to generational labels instead of talking about the 80s or the 90s. Conversations now revolve around millennials, Gen Y, or boomers. This change has been subtle, but it has transformed how we organise our memories and relate to others. Decades once offered a sense of shared experience, distinct music, fashion, and cultural movements that people of all ages participated in together. Generational categories, by contrast, sort us into narrower groups defined by birth years rather than collective events. Linguists and cultural critics point out this generational language is largely a marketing invention. By segmenting people into birth year cohorts, advertisers and media outlets can target audiences more precisely. But this approach often overlooks the reality of cultural participation cutting across age lines. For example, the so-called millennium whoop in pop music was enjoyed by listeners of all ages, not just millennials. Generational labels can make trends feel exclusive, even when they're widely shared. This tendency to divide culture into generational buckets fragments our sense of time. When people share cultural touchstones, like a hit song, a popular TV show, a major world event, they develop stronger collective memories. Decade-based identities fostered with these shared moments, creating a sense of unity that spans age groups. In the 1970s, for instance, people of all ages danced to disco and they wore polyester. The decade's trend belonged to everyone. Today, generational labels create parallel timelines where even people living through the same years may have entirely different reference points. The result is more fragmented timeline. Generational debates such as boomers versus zoomers reduce complex social dynamics to stereotypes and a fuel for sense of division. This can lead to alienation as individuals feel disconnected from the outside their aligned cohort. It also distorts cultural history by implying that only certain age groups shaped and enjoyed specific trends, when in reality these moments often cross generational boundaries. Advertisers have accelerated this shift by slicing audiences into generational segments, assuming uniform preference within each group. Yet real cultural life rarely fits these neat categories. For instance, someone born in 1985 might relate more to Gen X than millennial stereotypes, and the overlaps between age groups are often more significant than the differences. Decade-based identities capture these overlaps, providing a broader sense of belonging. Without decade markers, our brains lose some of the temporal reference points that help organise memory. Neuroscientists note that cultural milestones structure autobiographical memory, and when these markers fade into generational silos, time loses its clear chapters. The timeline becomes less about shared experience and more about isolating groups and moving in parallel. Still, the desire for shared cultural moments persists. Viral trends, whether a dance, a phrase, or a show, briefly recreate the unity that decades once provided, reminding us that collective timekeeping is still possible. The challenge now is whether we can intentionally revive this sense of togetherness and create new anchors for the present era. Instead of waiting for history to define the era, we can take an active role in shaping what the 2020s mean. Reclaiming the decade starts with noticing and naming patterns that set these years apart, not just the disruptions, but also the way people have responded and adapted together. Some of the clearest markers are visible. Post-pandemic, there's been a renewed appetite for communal experiences. Concerts are selling out faster than ever, and public gatherings remain an important factor. Fashion cycles have looped back to Y2K influences, blending nostalgia with a focus on comfort and sustainability. The rise of AI creativity tools is challenging how art, music, and writing are made and shared, giving the decade a technological signature that's hard to ignore. These aren't just passing trends, they're building blocks for how the 2020s might be remembered if we can choose to recognise them. Naming and celebrating these quantities isn't just about nostalgia for the future. Historically, society have used decade labels to create a framework for shared memory. The Roaring Twenties didn't become iconic by accident. People embraced jazz, flapper style, and the spirit of reinvention as conscious response to the times. By deciding what matters now, we're giving the 2020s a similar kind of clarity. When we call out the unique features of our era, we help anchor memories and create a sense of belonging that resists the blur of endless scroll and fragmented timelines. Digital culture complicates this process but doesn't make it impossible. Viral moments like a global meme or a TikTok dance sweeps across continents shows that millions can still share a slice of culture in real time. Those flashes of unity are reminders that even in a fractured media landscape, collective experiences are still possible. The challenge is to notice them, talk about them, and let them stand as a marker for the decade, rather than letting them fade into the background. This approach isn't about ignoring hardship. The 2020s will be remembered for their challenges, but also for the creativity and adaptation that emerged alongside them. By paying attention to the way people gather, create, and celebrate, we can ensure that memory of this decade is balanced and complete. Taking an active role in defining our time is one step towards feeling more grounded in the present. But there's another factor that shapes how we experience time, how much attention we give it to each moment as it happens. Neuroscience shows that the brain's memory center, the hippocampus, becomes much more active when encountering something unexpected or novel. This heightened activity helps create vivid, long-lasting memories and stretches our subjective sense of time. As children, everything is new. Each day brings unfamiliar sights, sounds, and experiences. The brain works overtime, building dense clusters of memories, which is why childhood often feels so expansive and slow. But as we grow older, routine takes over. The brain recognizes familiar patterns and stops devoting energy to recording them in detail. Days filled with repetitive tasks and predictable environments blur together. Weeks can vanish without any standout moments to anchor them. This is why adult life, especially when dominated by routine, can feel like it's slipping faster and faster. Modern distractions only amplify this effect. The endless scroll of social media, constant notifications, and passive entertainment keep our attention fragmented. We're only half engaged. The brain doesn't register experiences as meaningful or distinct. Instead, it glosses over them, leaving us with fewer mental bookmarks to look back on. Hours spent scrolling or multitasking are rarely remembered because the brain never fully processes what's happening. This creates the sensation that time is collapsing, a phenomenon researchers call temporal folding, where similar repetitive experiences merge into a single indistinct memory. Mindfulness offers a way to counteract this blur. Even brief moments of present moment awareness, like noticing the aroma of a morning coffee or the sound of footsteps outside, can help the brain register more information and create stronger memory anchors. Regular meditation has been linked to thicker brain tissue in regions associated with time perception, showing that training attention can actually expand our experience of time. Novelty works in much the same way. Breaking routines by trying something new, even small ways, wakes up the brain. Taking a different route to work, experimenting with a new recipe, or exploring unfamiliar neighbourhoods can all create distinct memories. This is why travel often feels richer and longer in hindsight. Each day is filled with new experiences that demand attention and leave a mark. Documenting life intentionally can also help. Rather than relying on passive digital trails, manually creating experiences through journaling, thoughtful captionized photos, or voice memos creates personal memory anchors. These small acts of reflection force us to notice and remember what might otherwise be lost in routine. Ultimately, the way we experience time isn't fixed. It responds to how we direct our attention, how we break from the ordinary, and how we choose to mark our days. By becoming more present and intentional, we can slow the perceived rush of time and give each moment more weight. This awareness is the first step in reclaiming a timeline that feels meaningful and complete, even as the world around us moves quickly. We all lose shared markers and let algorithms flatten culture. Time can feel like it's slipping away unnoticed, but we have the power to shape this era. Start naming what sets 2020 apart. Maybe it's the post pandemic joy wave, maybe it's AI remix years, or something entirely new. By focusing on the music, the trends, the innovation that matters, we can create anchors to help us all remember and connect. Reclaiming time isn't just about nostalgia, it's a way to deepen personal growth and strengthen our sense of community. What do you think we should call this decade? Share your ideas in the comments, and if you want to explore more ways to reconnect with time and meaning, subscribe for future videos.